Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, sponsored by the Draft Professors. Joined today by Draft Professors Taylor and Steve. We're on a little bit early, but that is because we are doing a college football playoff preview. And if we did it any later, we would be missing the game that we were previewing. Taylor, it's good to see you. Happy New Year. How are things?
Good. Happy New Year. Good to be back. I'm good to be back. It's been a while, been a few weeks, had a good holiday, and ready to talk a little football. Steve, how's it going?
Good, man. Good to see you. Good to see both of you. Happy New Year. As I said off camera, Jim, I got to see you last week for an excellent mock draft show we did last Friday, and looking forward to trying to join in the chat for the one you're doing 3 Eastern tomorrow. But it's bittersweet time, right? It's where we really get to know who's going to be in the draft, as the underclassmen declare, and the NFL playoffs, but bittersweet in that it's coming to an end. But here we are, game in about an hour from now, Miami Ole Miss. And guess we're going to talk about tonight's game as well as tomorrow.
Yeah, so tonight we have Miami Ole Miss. Tomorrow we have Indiana, Oregon. So I guess the first question that I'm thinking of, if you were to think back to August, Shaw, did you see any of these four teams being here as one of the four best teams in August?
I would say Oregon, probably. Of these four, thinking that they could win in the Big Ten. Like Indiana was a home game for them. That was their game they ended up losing in the regular season. But on paper, at the beginning of the season, that was like an advantage for Oregon, right? But Fernando Mendoza obviously went down there and won the Heisman as well, which I don't think many people were expecting. So in terms of that, I would say Oregon. And I said it before the season. I thought Dante Moore would be the easy 1-1 for the 27 class. He's in play for the 1-1 in the 26 class if he declares. So it's pretty interesting that he's in the semifinal, and we have to figure out the portal and who's coming back and whether or not people are going to the draft. And the timeline of it is just all so weird right now that it just feels like we're in a really kind of goofy spot in the history of college football. And like, what are these players doing? It's basically free agency, issues all over the place. And I would pick Oregon, but it's just a weird time in college football.
So Steve, how about you? Did you see any of these four teams being one of the four best teams in the country?
Yeah, I thought the Final Four was going to be Oregon, Ohio State, and I thought it would be Texas and Clemson. So, I have a 25% batting average. So there we go.
Yeah. So, and I also think, like, if I had to pick the biggest surprise in the Final Four, to me, it's Ole Miss. Right. Like, I'm thinking, like, when we were going through the summer and we were covering, like, we did a preview on Miami. We did a preview on Indiana. We did a preview on Oregon. We didn't do an Ole Miss draft preview. Like, we didn't think that roster, in the over the summer was going to have the caliber of players that would warrant being drafted, but yet they're playing in the Final Four. They've had several players emerge into the draft sphere. Steve, what players on Ole Miss are your favorites, whether they're coming out this year or next year?
Yeah, so one of the surprises for me was Trindad Chambliss. I've really gotten into liking watching what he's done, especially last week. It certainly doesn't have the, what the NFL likes in the prototypical size. I think a good size comparison is Kyler Murray, but no argument as far as what he's been able to accomplish. I actually did follow the receiver who had a real heck of a game last week, Dezon Stribling. I remember him from his Penn State days, and I do have a draftable grade on him. I have a day 3 grade, and just what he was able to do in the quarterfinal last week. But I actually think in terms of Ole Miss, one of my guys coming out of summer scouting is their defensive tackle, Xavier Harris. And I really do think if it wasn't for some of the off the field things, we would be having more intensive. I'm not saying day one, but I think a day two conversation. I think he will be drafted. But I just like the way he plays. And as I said a minute ago, he was one of my guys for Ole Miss coming out of summer scouting. What about you, Cha?
Yeah, I think honestly, it's a couple guys. There's one on the offense that's kind of making that machine run, and that's Keywan Lacey, but he's not draft eligible, right? So we'll talk about him a lot next year, especially in the running back class, which the running back class looks pretty fun next year. But for this year, I'm going to say Trindad Chambliss. I think it's an interesting study right now because he already put in a waiver to go back to school. If he doesn't get that waiver, then I guess he has to enter the NFL draft. And it's interesting now that Ty Simpson entered the NFL draft because it kind of pushes Chambliss down. Also, Carson Beck, who I'm sure we'll talk about in a second. But for Ole Miss, I think Trindad Chambliss has just been unbelievable. I mean, Austin Simmons went down early, and Trindad Chambliss just never lost his job when he took over. Right, he went to Ferris State the last couple of years, led them to the playoff. And I believe Ferris State actually won it again this year, if I'm not mistaken. But so yeah, Trindad Chambliss, he's been super surprising, super fun to watch. And honestly, I like him as a day 3 quarterback. I think someone, has a use for him on a roster, and he just makes plays. He's a guy that is one of those quarterbacks that you can't just, you look at him and you're like, all right, well, he looks pretty, average, maybe slightly above average in terms of size. I think he's only like 6'1". But he kind of just makes plays, like a little bit like Baker Mayfield, right? Where he just extends the play, makes the throw on the run outside the pocket. He can scramble a little bit. So I like him entering the draft. I don't know if he'll get that waiver, but it certainly does kind of open things up for this quarterback class if he's not able to get that waiver and he has to enter.
Yeah, and I think Chambliss, with 2 potential games left, could solidify himself going in the top 50 of the draft. Right? We've seen Michael Penix do this a couple of years ago in the playoffs where he put on a great run, and the run in the playoffs is probably what got Michael Penix drafted in round 1. I think Trindad Chambliss could have a similar trajectory. What do you think, Shaw?
Yeah, top 50 is a little bit of a stretch, but like I said, that's why it's an interesting case. And now I guess Ty Simpson comes out, so that makes it a little bit more difficult because I think he's a back half of the first round, early round 2 guy. And I don't know how many quarterbacks that are eligible this year really deserve to go top 50, let alone top 100. So I think he's probably more of like that Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder range, right? Where someone might take him on day 3. I don't know if I see top 50 as a potential for him, although, like you said, he has 2 games to prove it, and he has 2 games to prove me wrong. But for right now, I probably see between pick 80 and 120, somewhere in that range.
Yep. So, Steve, we've got Fernando Mendoza, we've got Dante Moore, we have Carson Beck and Trindad Chambliss. Out of those 4 quarterbacks, probably Chambliss has surprised us the most. Who is the second most surprising quarterback out of the 4 that are left that maybe you didn't know that they were going to get here? Or is this what they were expected to do?
Well, I think, surprise is an interesting word. I was, coming into the summer, coming out of the summer, I was up there, on Mendoza. I mean, I'll admit he wasn't number 1. I had my eyes focused on the Norris Sellers of South Carolina. I thought we were going to see a lot more out of Cade Klubnik of Clemson, and Mendoza was my number 3. It didn't take long. I don't think it was much, into the season. Maybe by week 4, I started hyping him as my 1. So that's not really a surprise. I think overall, outside of Chambliss, I guess I'll say Beck, because I didn't know really what to expect out of Miami this season. From a coaching and on down, we know the pieces. I was excited, to see Beck play with, freshman, the receiver, Malachi Toney. But, I think for me, it was more about their defense. And we've certainly talked, a lot about the pieces there, whether it's Keontae Scott or Ruben Bain or Akeem Messenger. So, I think I'm a little surprised that Beck is playing tonight. I didn't think as a whole that Miami, would really scratch and sniff the semifinals, and here we are.
Yeah, and Shaw, in the Big Ten, did you expect Oregon and Indiana to be the top two teams?
No, I, along with everyone else, thought it was going to be Ohio State. And I really did think it was going to be Ohio State, and they just got punched in the mouth last week by this Miami front, and they couldn't withstand it. So I'm interested to see if Ole Miss is going to be able to combat the Ruben Bain, Akeem Messidor combo, along with Keontae Scott and Jacoby Thomas in the back end. So it's going to be a really tough challenge for Chambliss. But I mean, you can't ask for a better defense to increase your stock value against, right? The team that just beat Ohio State, one of the best defenses in the entire country, with potential 2-3 first round picks on there. So that'll be a fun matchup to watch. I think it's interesting from a Miami perspective, because I agree with Steve. I don't think anyone really saw Carson Beck revitalizing his NFL draft stock the way that he has. And I mean, sure, that's because a lot of these guys that we evaluated in the summer, like Klubnik, Nussmeier, Drew Allard, like all of these guys that we evaluated, Norris Sellers, Arch Manning, are either going back to school or their draft stock has considerably dropped due to seasons with 6 wins, 7 wins, or in Lenora Sellers' case, like 3 wins. So I think Carson Beck has by default kind of increased his draft stock just by playing well and leading the team to this point. And a big reason for that is their explosive playmaker, Malachi Toney, on offense. He's a true freshman. I think that's what's interesting about Miami and Oregon. They're both relying on true freshmen at their wide receiver 1 position. Oregon with DeCorian Moore. So it's interesting to see how those teams have hit the portal for like the quarterback, right? They solved it with Carson Beck. They got the running back, Fletcher, right? He's been there a couple of years. And then they got a true freshman in there as well. So they have a good balance of young playmakers. And obviously Toney won't be able to come out for another couple of years. But when he does, I mean, he's going to be a wide receiver that people are talking about.
Yeah, I think it's interesting staying on the Miami thing, because we talked about the defense, but even some of the things we saw in the quarterfinal against Ohio State offensively, you just brought up Mark Fletcher Jr., the running back, but we've seen this week Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese declared today, and I think Sonny Styles' worst game on tape this year was last week in the quarters. Just seeing the missed tackles, the way Markel Bell, the offensive lineman for Miami, was able to push him around. Now, granted, Markel Bell, I think, is 6'9" and upwards of 330 pounds, but still, when you look at the pedigree of the Matt Patricia defense and these guys that we've talked about, I thought that was impressive. And Mark Fletcher, I think, improved his stock a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see what, they're able to do. I do like a couple of pieces, on that Ole Miss defense, right? I'm sure in these shows we've talked about their D-line, whether Princeville or Sunterine Perkins, but do they compare? How do they stock up against, Ruben Bain and Akeem Messidor? I don't know.
And then on that Miami offense too, I think CJ Daniels is probably raising his stock about 10 spots with every good game, right? He probably was coming into the college football playoff as a fringe 3rd round guy, and he's healthy, which for CJ Daniel, like, he's had some injuries, in prior seasons, and he's been on a few other teams because he was on LSU last year. Missed some time with injuries. So to me, CJ Daniels being the other guy opposite Malachi Toney at wide receiver, but I really think CJ Daniels can start putting on some 2nd round tape if he plays well tonight, and then a Miami win and they play again in the final. Shaw, how much have you done on CJ Daniels up to this point?
I haven't done a lot, but I think the big thing for him is he's a 6th year player. So he's already going to be 23, 24 entering the NFL. So I think he might put some round 2 tape on there, but I don't think that's necessarily reflective of where he gets drafted. I think he's probably going to be closer down there to 100 in that range. Maybe top 100 probably. I don't know if he's top 75, somewhere down there. But I haven't done a lot of extensive research in here, but I was going to ask about Mark Fletcher because he's a true junior, I believe. So he hasn't declared, obviously. They have a game tonight. But if he does come out, he's the RB2, right?
I don't know if I could give him even top 4 or 5.
I don't even know if there's a running back that I would take outside of Jeremiah Love over him right now.
So what do you consider Mark Fletcher's dominant trait, Shaw?
Being huge. And I know that sounds really, really dumb.
I don't know his weight. I know, what is he, 6'2", 210, something like that. I don't know if I have the weight profile right. I mean, he's a big boy. No, I think he's actually closer to 6.
I mean, and he's putting up his best games against the best competition too. And like, there's momentum there, right? Like he's clearly carrying the team on his back. He is the reason they won in Texas A&M. He had explosive runs against Ohio State against a very, very good defense. I think he's really opened up the offense for Carson Beck and those guys. And I think when you're that size and you can move, like he does, I don't think he's the most athletic, most agile person in the world. But I'm not saying he's Derrick Henry. We know Derrick Henry was such a freak of nature in terms of his height, weight, speed, all that. But I think there's a place on an NFL roster for a guy like Mark Fletcher of this size. And I think the running back class as a whole has a fairly large gap between 1 and 2. Whoever you think 2 is, it's not close to Jeremiah Love. It's just not. So I think there's room for him to take that number 2 spot in this draft if he was to come out. But I think he's more likely to go back and go to school. But if he doesn't, it's an interesting conversation for me.
Yeah, I've got a Brian. It's a tough comparison, but I liken him a little bit to Brian Robinson Jr., who the Commanders drafted. I think Robinson has more elite long speed, but for Fletcher, he runs good with the square pads. He's got good vision on inside zone. He finishes forward through contact. He keeps his pad level straight. He's got power. He's got toughness. He's reliable, contact balance. He's got a good lateral burst, but yeah, here's one of the things where I disagree with you because I don't think I would have him in my top 5.
Well, and that was where I was going with the dominant trait. So one of the key themes that I've had with several people on the running back class. So Fletcher graded well. He's definitely a top 10 back if he chooses to come out. But he's top 10 day 3. And the reason would be to be taken on day 2 as a running back, you want somebody that has a dominant trait, whether that's speed, burst, power, something. And Fletcher does a lot of things well, but I don't know that he has like that single dominant trait that can make him an RB1 at the NFL level or be an immediate starter at the NFL level. Like I think if you're taking a running back on day 2, you're expecting that running back to come in and get, we'll say 50% of the carries, probably a little bit more than 50, but like a Travion Henderson or a Quinshon Judkins were a major part of the offense. I don't know that you're drafting Fletcher to do that as a rookie.
Yeah, but I'd even argue there Travion Henderson didn't get more touches than Ramondre Stevenson. Quinshon Judkins wasn't really the guy until, Jerome Ford went down. There were some injuries. So I just think the running back landscape has completely changed. And if you can find a 6'2", 225 guy that makes people miss and he gets 4 yards a carry, 5 yards a carry in the NFL, there's a role for that. And I'm not saying that he's going to dominate or be the true running back 1. There's, how many can you count on your hands in the league that are true running back 1s? You can't even count Bijan. Algier gets 17 touches a game half the time. So it's like, you translate these guys into the NFL based on, a what if. It's like, it's less about what if they're a dominant guy. What if they fit a role? Like Brian Robinson was a 3rd round pick. I think my point more so was that we might see a running back go top 10, and then we might not see another one go until after pick 50. And so why not Mark Fletcher? You know what I mean? So I think that's more what I mean, is that there's such a big gap that I don't have a clearly defined running back 2 at this point. I know obviously some people do, but I think Mark Fletcher is just, again, Trindad Chambliss, we talked about it. He's got 2 games against good defenses to show kind of what he is. And maybe he does. You see a little bit of a dominant trait, and he vaults himself right up there.
So one of the other running backs in the playoff is Roman Hemby for Indiana. And he played at Maryland last year. And we had pretty good grades on him had he come out last year. But Steve, what do you think of Roman Hemby, the running back in Indiana?
Yes. So, he escaped from Maryland. He wanted an expanded offensive role and to be more, a feature back. I mean, he was a 4-star recruit, multi-year Big Ten production. He's known to be versatile. He's reliable. He's obviously Indiana's primary. In terms of, I love his vision. I love how versatile he is. He has some receiving ability. I wouldn't call him a speedster. I wouldn't call him an explosive runner, but he creates plays when blocking breaks down. It's just a good overall skill set that fits what, Signetti is doing. And I really think some of, Mendoza's a really good quarterback, right? But, his game works because the play action works because people have to respect what Hemby can bring, right? And I do think I don't necessarily consider him, we were just talking a minute ago in terms of that 3 down, back. And I know it's rare anyway, right? You don't see that anymore. It's running back by committee. And by the way, gentlemen, we will not tolerate any Ohio State slander on this program. And just to go off on a tangent, Judkins, he needed a little time. Obviously there were the legal issues and, he didn't sign a contract. But anyway, back to Hemby. To me, he's a lighter version of Jamal Williams, who was in Green Bay. And where did he go after that? Was it Atlanta? I think he went down there. Yeah, I think so. But, spread offense that emphasizes versatility. He's another day 3 guy, outside of Jeremiah Love, what isn't? But, he's an intriguing prospect.
So I think 3 down back generally means you don't have to be taken off the field in a given situation. And that's Roman Hemby. Because if you need him to block, he's going to be able to block. If you need him to catch, he's going to be able to catch. And he can definitely run the rock. So, from my standpoint, as I'm, looking at the running back class, what do I do with my dynasty rosters? If I can get a Roman Hemby in a 3rd round of a fantasy draft, he's probably not going to start wherever he goes as a rookie. But whatever team has him is going to be able to use him for 4 years. And they're going to be able to use him in all parts of the offense, the passing game, running game. They'll be able to leave him on the field to block. So, again, not a running back that necessarily has a dominant trait, but definitely a running back that can help your team by running, receiving, blocking. So we haven't talked about the Indiana wide receivers yet. So they have a few. So Elijah Surratt, probably the name at the top, followed very closely by Omar. And I'm trying to remember.
Cooper Jr.
Omar Cooper Jr. I was about to give a different Omar's name, but Omar Cooper Jr. So Steve, which of those 2 receivers do you have graded highest right now?
Yeah, I've got a borderline first round grade on Surratt. 6'2", very well built wide receiver frame, good length, play straight. His catch radius came over from James Madison. Boy, did that sound familiar, right? For Indiana players. He was a very lightly recruited prospect and just exploded at the FCS level. But even coming out of JMU, he was known for his ball skills and his toughness and being physical. He is their primary. He did miss a couple of games, and it was good. You got to, we got some good tape on Cooper, as well as Oh my God, who's the other guy? He's not draft eligible yet.
Is
Help
it
me out.
EJ?
No. Let me see if I can.
And then they
All
have
right, well,
there's a tight. Is it
Becker.
no? Not
Becker. I'm
Becker,
thinking
yeah.
Becker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they've got the tight end. He's a complimentary tight end. You're talking Riley Noah. I can't even pronounce it. Nowakowski. Shaw, correct me if I insulted you having the monopoly on the ending of that name.
No, you nailed
But
it.
thank you. Anyway, but just I just love his ball skills. I love how competitive he is, how physical Surratt is. Not a burner. His top end speed. I think sometimes he struggles with separation. It definitely helps that he's got a quarterback who's so accurate and deadly on a back shoulder throw and could do it with pinpoint accuracy. I see him, physical X or Z receiver. He'll thrive in play action, timing based offenses. And like I said, he's a fringe round one for me. I think I moved him up a little bit when Chris Bell of Louisville, went down with the ACL 2 months ago or 6 weeks ago, whatever it is. But yeah, he's certainly, a favorite. I know there are some people that compare him to Alan Lazard. I don't know. I don't remember that much about Alan Lazard coming out of Iowa State, but Charles, what do you think of Surratt?
Oh yeah, I think it's going to be really fun to watch him in the Senior Bowl and one-on-ones because I think everybody that I listen to talk about Elijah Surratt is very focused on the fact that he doesn't separate, or they see that he's a little bit slow to separate or not as quick in between his cuts to get out of man coverage. So I'm excited to see him in the one-on-ones. I think that's going to be probably one of the things I'm looking forward to most at the Senior Bowl. I know he's a little bit smaller, but he really reminds me of Cortland Sutton in the way that the Broncos use him. He's always their go-to guy on third down, just the way they talk about him, that he's always open. I mean, his nickname is Waffle House, okay? So this guy is – I just think he's a really good wide receiver. I don't know exactly where he is for me right now. He's in my top 5. He was in my top 5 in summer scouting. I believe he was 3rd behind Jordan Tyson and Antonio Williams. Obviously, Antonio Williams' injury pushed him down a little bit. So I think Surratt goes higher than him, but I've moved Mekhi Lemon up above. So I don't know exactly what – that order is, but I do see Surratt ending top 5 for me. As far as Cooper, I think Cooper's really good. I don't think he's late day 2 probably prospect. I think you could see maybe something where, a team early on day 4 moves up to get him, kind of like Troy Franklin. Again, just giving Broncos examples here. But I like Cooper. Cooper's a little bit more that like over the middle of the field, intermediate short route, right? Obviously he has the highlight reel catch for Mendoza's Heisman campaign. So I just think, I think Surratt for me is a little bit ahead of Cooper. And then I'm excited to see, Becker. Is it Becker? Is that what you said for the other? Yeah, I'm excited to see Becker continue to develop because he's been a really, really good deep threat for them.
Yeah.
So after Elijah Surratt, who is the second best receiver that's draft eligible in the college football playoff? Is it Daniel? Is it Malik Benson? Or is it Omar Cooper?
That's a great question.
Yeah, that is. I'm leaning Cooper, maybe with a slight edge over CJ. I think I'll give it to Cooper.
So one of the players I think that has a lot to gain is Malik Benson, one of the wide receivers on Oregon. So Malik Benson was interesting because he was one of the first receivers we did scouting reports on, right? So as you guys know, like when we start doing scouting reports, like in the middle of October, we're doing it on about, 6 weeks worth of game film. So he didn't play much early in the season. So he was one of the people where his grade during scouting reports shot up by the time Randall did his big board. And Malik Benson's continuing to move up. So this is a receiver, took him a little bit to transition into the Oregon offense. And then Oregon's also had some wide receiver injuries. So there's been a lot of guys rotating in and out. Benson benefited from that because he was able to get some more playing time. Not the best run blocker in the world. So if your NFL team values wide receivers that run block, there's a good chance Malik Benson's not on their board. But he does run really good routes. He has some explosiveness. My opinion would be he has a lot to gain by Oregon playing 2 more games.
Yep. Someone else that has a lot to gain, and I would put him in consideration for the next best receiver after Elijah Surratt. I do think I'd probably have Cooper ranked a little bit higher right now. But another guy at the Senior Bowl that I'm really excited to see, just accepted his invitation, is Harrison Wallace III. He just had 9 catches for 156 yards and a touchdown against Georgia. I mean, you watch some of his routes, the way he decelerates, I think it's, really, really his strongest trait. He can run really crisp routes, and he's able to catch the ball. He's obviously a favorite of Trindad Chambliss, and it has emerged over the last part of the season because he's had been targeted 39 times in the last 5 games. So he's a player that I'm going to be watching at the Senior Bowl right alongside Elijah Surratt, and I could see him, increasing his draft stock into this, solidified second, third round.
Okay, Steve, best offensive line in the college football playoffs is?
All right, so Miami, I got to think about this. I'm going back to, I talked about it before, with the pieces that Miami had.
Yeah. So let me talk through this.
I think I'm gonna.
Well,
I think I'll lean to Oregon.
Right. I was going to say Oregon, but
yeah.
Here's a good way to talk through it. So Oregon has Isaiah World and Emmanuel Pregnon that are probably not going to get out of the top 50. Isaiah World might. What do they say? First round traits, day 3 tape. He's going on day 2.
Yep.
Split it in the middle.
I could see Pregnon. I could see some teams taking Pregnon in round 1, being the first guard, maybe even higher than Vega Ioane, Penn State.
Yep.
Or I could see him being the second one. And I love the center. I mean, he's already going back to school.
Yes.
Laloulu, Poncho, big Poncho. Yeah, he's going back. But it's those 3 pieces, that easily. I like Pat Coogan as a center for Indiana. He's a day 3 guy for me. I don't think you could, compare him to Laloulu, but yeah, definitely Oregon.
Yeah, and I think Indiana, we may have this conversation about Indiana's offensive line next year. Because next year, I believe Carter Smith is coming out, and Indiana has a really good offensive line. I think there's going to be some blue chips on Oregon. And also specifically, Oregon's defensive line against Indiana's offensive line, because there's some very draftable Oregon defensive linemen. Right. Yeah. So that's Mateo Ugalele. Mm-hmm. There is Amari Washington. And then remind me which names I'm missing, Shaw.
I think those are the 2 main ones. I believe there's another interior lineman, but he's already declared to go back to school, right?
Yes. And then there's Tatum Tuioti.
Yeah.
He's the one that's improved his stock the most, I'd say. On that D-line, although I've seen Mateo kind of getting some first-round buzz again, as he was maybe before the season, but then it kind of tapered off, and now he's back. But I'll give you one. I like Pat Coogan, too. I think Indiana's offensive line, just from a pure football standpoint, I think they're one of the best. But Oregon, obviously, from a draft perspective, I think they have Pregnon, they have the center, which I'm not going to try to pronounce his name right now, but let me give you one. I think
just call him Poncho.
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, I'll just take the best lineman in the whole entire class, potentially, and that's Francis Mauigoa. And I think he anchors Miami's offensive line. So, not to mention the guy you were mentioning blocking Sonny Styles, Markel Bell, is 6'9", 340 pounds. NFL team's probably going to be looking at him. I know the guard, Inez Cooper, as well, 6'6", 350. So it's not, there isn't as much maybe day 2 hype for this offensive line as there would be for like Oregon. I know obviously maybe late day 1, but like to me, you have a top 10 player in the class on this line with just big really big athletes on that offensive line. So I'm going to lean Miami here a little bit for the best offensive line remaining.
Well, Charles, I'm glad you shouted out Miami, because Miami in this draft probably has 4 linemen drafted. I don't know if the Miami center is at Brockemeyer. I believe that's a fringe draftable, and not a lot of centers get drafted. So, but there's definitely potential for Miami to put 4 linemen into the draft, whereas Oregon can only put 2. But the 2 for Oregon are probably going to go really high. And then the 3rd Oregon lineman is probably going to be a round 1 player in 2027, and that's Lulu. So,
yeah, for sure. They're both really good offensive lines. And that's probably my prediction of who's going to be in the national championship.
Yep. And then one other player, and he was touched on briefly, is Keontae Scott. So I think Keontae Scott's draft stock, it went up about a round from, and I'm going to say around consensus. So consensus on Keontae Scott, because I think you guys covered him with safeties, right?
Yeah.
And I think when we covered
the safeties, I think we did them in that nickel hybrid thing.
And yeah. I heard like round 3, 4, somewhere in there, right? Well, I'm now hearing there's at least 3 people within Draft Professors that are now saying Keontae Scott is top 50. So Price Carter would take him in round 2 to the Chiefs, right? As one example. And then I'd have to remember the others. But I believe one of the Patriots Draft Professors was also saying they would take him round 2 to New England. So at the back end of round 2. So Keontae Scott, I think, has a lot to play for. This is somebody who was a boundary corner at Auburn last year. He has switched into the slot playing for Miami, and he might project better at the NFL level to safety. But Shaw, what do you think of Keontae Scott from Miami?
Yeah, I think that's where it's key, right? He kind of made that switch inside. I know we talked about it quite a bit on the safety, show, right? Some of these guys that project more to safety, it's more just because they're going to play nickel in the NFL, right? So like that's what I believe that he's going to play in the NFL. He's physical enough to play press man as a corner, but he's smart enough in zone to sit there on the inside and either read out to the flat or back up towards the middle of the field. So I'm okay with him playing nickel in the NFL. I don't necessarily need to see him be a full-time safety. I think the versatility that he brings to the back end of a defense, yeah, it definitely could get him, drafted inside the top 50. I think, he's definitely he's one of those players that's kind of on like a meteoric rise, it seems, over the last, 2 weeks since he played in that last game. And even before that, he had a big game, I believe, towards the end of the season as well, where I think he had 2 picks or something like that. So he is a player that's rising for sure. And I think he's one of those guys that, I got to dive back into the tape on him again, because like I said, I think I don't have him covered in my rankings. I know we talked about him maybe briefly, but we talked about Jacoby Thomas more than we talked about Keontae Scott on the safety show. So he's one of those players that I'll be evaluating, in the coming weeks.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Keontae Scott intercepted Ohio State. So he now has an undrafted free agent grade for me. But no, I mean, there's so many things about Scott that I like, and it was hard not to get excited for that play, despite my, my fanboy things. But, the tackles for a loss, the quick trigger, run fits. He plays with urgency. He takes good angles. He's just a physical tackler. He's comfortable passing off routes in zone. His run support, his versatility, and the football IQ. I definitely think he has helped himself quite a bit this season. And I don't know about round 1, but, round 2 I don't think is not unrealistic.
So in our last 32 team mock, Avion Terrell dropped out of the top 50, probably because he was a slot corner. I don't think Keontae Scott is going to be sniffing round 1, but depending upon how a team values what you need in a defensive back, because I think Keontae Scott, it's the versatility of safety or slot, whereas Avion Terrell is just a really good corner, but that's going to be a slot and maybe he plays boundary. So you wouldn't be drafted. You might draft Terrell and Scott to play slot, But if you also need a boundary corner, you're more likely to like Terrell. But if you're waiting on some type of slot safety hybrid, there's a lot of choices in the draft, which may include Trindad Chambliss, Preston Hodge, Keontae Scott. And if you look at those players close enough, you might say, well, if I get one of the three, I'm good. I don't need to be the first one to take a slot player.
Yeah. I just want to say shame on everyone who did not take Avion Terrell inside the top 50. Absolute shame. I know this is the college football playoff and Clemson wasn't close, but it wasn't because of Avion Terrell.
So,
I think he actually went not long before Will Lee did in terms of the corners. I don't remember.
I like Will Lee. Will Lee's a good big corner. He was a K-State guy too before he transferred to A&M. But to me, Avion Terrell is a top 25 player in the class, and I'm going to stand on that. I don't really like the way he attacks the football after the catch, whether it's in front of him or whatever. Like, he is a playmaker on defense, and you can't I'm not going to sit there and stress over if he's going to play full-time slot or if he's going to play full-time boundary, and I'm not going to knock him for that. The fact that he can do both and makes plays at both, I think that's only going to elevate him for me.
Yeah, I can see that. And from where he goes in the draft standpoint, going back to Will Lee, we did a Senior Bowl defensive back podcast last night. There are people that are really high on Will Lee. So one of our guests from A to Z Sports said that Will Lee is corner one at the Senior Bowl, and for him, it's not really particularly close. So that would be over Chris Johnson. That would be over, there's one other big-time corner. And I can't even think of who it is, but it was like between Will Lee, Chris Johnson, DeCario Davis.
Okay.
And he says, this is Will Lee, and he says, it's not really close. So, this is not somebody that's seen the Chris Johnson round one vibe yet. He would say he would be more like. Oh, go ahead.
I just think it's impossible. I think it's impossible to say it's not close at this point. To be honest with you, we haven't seen him do anything. We haven't seen him test. We haven't seen him run. We haven't seen him play in the Senior Bowl. We haven't seen him do one-on-ones. All we've seen is what's on the floor. I mean, we've talked about Devin Moore, right? Devin Moore's one of those corners that he could easily be the best cornerback at the Senior Bowl, right? I personally like Chandler Rivers. I think he's a really dominant player that can play in the slot. DeCario Davis, 6'4", Trindad Chambliss. We talked about it. So, I don't know. I respect him going all in on Will Lee like that, but Will Lee, to me, I mean, he has work to do, right? He's a little bit of a bigger corner. He's not the most versatile. He's not the most easily left and right moving corner you'll ever see. So there's some things that I think Will Lee has to show in one-on-ones. And again, he's a big physical corner. I think he's a little bit bigger than he's listed 6'1", 189, but he seems like he looks bigger than that. So I'll be interested to see what he tests. But I think all of these corners are kind of in the same range with something to prove. You mentioned Chris Johnson. Tim's looking at the roster here. Even Ephesians Prysock, another 6'4" corner. Some teams are going to fall in love with these guys that are 6'2", 6'3", 6'4". So if Will Lee really only
you got both. Jalen Everett falls into that bucket too.
Yep, exactly. That's another one.
From Georgia, Yep.
I like Prysock. I just find him a little stiff, and I think that's why you're going to have the other one go, so much earlier. I think Prysock will get drafted. But anyway, meanwhile,
other than Keontae Scott, what other defensive backs in the college football playoff are standing out to you, Chuck?
I love D'Angelo Pons. He's a guy that I think is going to play slot. I know he plays a lot of boundary corner for Indiana right now, but I think his physicality, his size limits what he can do out there at the next level. I know people think that he can play out and on the boundary, and good. If he can, great. But I think you put him in the slot, give him that ability to trigger on run downhill, and you give him the ability to also cover man-to-man or cover, close to the line of scrimmage, quick slot receivers. I think he's going to lock people up. He's one of those guys that, he fights tooth and nail every single play. Rave reviews from all the coaches, media, anyone in Indiana will tell you that D'Angelo Pons is that dude. So for me, he's the guy that's highest ranked on my board from the DBs that are the teams remaining.
So, Steve, any other DBs in the college football playoff you'd like to bring everybody's attention to?
Yeah, and we don't know if he's coming out. At least I haven't seen anything, but certainly a name from Oregon that's been talked about. But here we go again, Dylan Thieneman, still my safety number 2. I consider him their problem solver, right? He's got flexibility. He's an interchangeable safety. Easily would be very surprised if he gets out of round 2. I would be very surprised. I am looking forward. I think we're talking about it next week. We're talking about the safeties that'll be at the Senior and Shrine Bowl, and it's really exciting. The names that are going to be down in mobile, up in mobile for me. But I love Thieneman. I've been high on him. And if it wasn't for Downs, I wouldn't put him in a round 1 if Caleb Downs didn't exist. But I think he's been a fantastic player this year. I hope he comes out, but I guess we'll find out in the next couple of weeks. His eyes, his trigger, the angles he takes, and he's a reliable finisher. He plays faster, I think, than what he's been timed, but that's because that beautiful mind, his IQ and his processing.
Yep. And then I'm going to give one other shout out, and that would be to Ole Miss safety Wyatt Williams. So Williams was a player that Brian Maffey called out in the summer. So he was pretty high on Brian's summer scouting safety board. And there's been a lot. This is a really good safety class, everybody. Really good. So you're not hearing about Wyatt Williams because there's probably 10 safeties on the board ranked higher. They're going to go on day 1 or 2. But Wyatt Williams is going to make an NFL team really happy on day 3. So wanted to make sure Ole Miss safeties got a little bit of love before we pause for podcaster identification. So, Steve, you want to let everybody know about all the content you make and where they can find you?
Yeah, it's going to start heating up now that we're at the tail end and we know exactly who's coming out. I have to update my banner here because it's not Steve SWFL, it's Steve _NFL. But yep, that's where you can find me on X. And I'm launching the Substack next week. So I'll have some more there. And then, yep, exactly. Raise the roof. And then start getting more involved doing the YouTube stuff on my channel, which is the same name, Steve _NFL. And that is a hint to the busiest man in showbiz, my partner here, Chaw. But we need to link up and start doing some videos again. But
oh yeah, for sure. You can find myself footballwithchild.com. Getting back into the draft swing. Took a few weeks off. Just been doing my NFL college picks. So, I just did a mock draft for the AFC West. That was a fun exercise to do. Follow me on Twitter as well. You can see it right there.
Cool. And I want to remind everybody to follow Taylor, follow Steve. Draft Professor cannot put this content out without Taylor and Steve showing up every Thursday at 7 Eastern. Next week, as Steve alluded to, it's Shrine and Senior Bowl safeties. And then we have a couple of other podcasts scheduled that we'll let you know. But the safety group at the Senior Bowl, which is next week's show, as well as the safeties at the Shrine. But the Senior Bowl safety group is going to be really special this year. So there's several top 100 safeties that different people have graded. Genesis Smith just declared today. That's going to be the podcast next week. So for Taylor.
Predictions? Hang on, before we go.
I was going to do predictions on one thing. We didn't even talk about Kenyon Sadiq. I don't think there's much to talk about, but he's a first-round tight end. We didn't even talk about it.
And you know what? He's not. I don't even consider him a tight end anymore because, when you say tight end, I mean, he's 6'2". He doesn't have that. He's just a weapon. And I actually, in the mock draft that the draft professors did last Friday, I took him for the Jets. I took Dante Moore at 2, and I took Kenyon Sadiq. I forget. Well, we didn't know where the pick was back then. I think it was still 18 was the Colts.
Yep.
Yeah. But
what's your
predictions tonight and tomorrow?
Indiana and Miami.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go Miami
and Indiana.
I'm going to go Miami and Oregon. I think Indiana is really, really good. I just think it's tough to beat a team twice. I think Oregon knows who. Oregon rotates like 6 running backs, and I think they've figured out their two-headed monster heading into this game. It's something they didn't have figured out in week 5 or 6 whenever they played it.
Yeah, they've been. Well, wasn't it Davis? Didn't Jordan have the most amount of carries or yards in the first matchup? I don't remember. I think so. I think he was over Whittington and.
I know. I think they were just rotating like 6 guys in. So I think also like at that time, Dante Moore had played or started 12 career games. Now he's up to almost 20. I think that added experience helps. He's got something to prove. Like, with Ty Simpson declaring, I think you don't think that puts a little chip in the back of his head saying, "Oh, I should be the best quarterback in this class," or So I'm gonna go Oregon with the slight edge. I could be really wrong, but I'm gonna go Oregon, Miami, all green national championship. Everybody's wearing green.
And Steve, what was your prediction?
Yeah, I as a Jet fan, it would be better for Oregon because maybe we'd get a little more color if Dante Moore comes out. I personally don't think he will. So, but yeah, I think Miami, Indiana.
Okay. So for everybody watching, thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the football game tonight and tomorrow night. We will see you on a podcast again at about 9 p.m. tonight where we go over the senior and the Shrine running backs. We will see you soon. Thank you very much.